Hello and welcome to Addicted to Lacrosse. This is Season 3, Episode 15. Today is Sunday, April the 10th, 2016. My name is Graham Perro. With me today are Tyler Fitch and Melissa Daphne. The gang's all back. I've got a good show tonight. We've got some playoff, I was saying news, but some playoff positioning to talk about. Buffalo is in. I think New England is in. We may have a talk about that. Nobody's been eliminated officially yet, but Toronto and Vancouver are both awfully close. Dhane Smith, believe it or not, is setting records. So we'll talk about
No
that a little bit.
way! I don't believe it.
I know it's hard to believe, but we will go into that. And we've got 5 games to talk about, though Tyler may be the only one who saw more than one of these. So, yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. Let's start with the playoff picture. The Bandits clinched this past weekend, so they are now in. The Rush and the Mammoth have already done that. In fact, the Rush and the Mammoth have already clinched home games. I don't think the Bandits have done that yet. They are in the playoffs, but they haven't clinched higher than third place. There's actually an article on my blog that outlines a lot of these possibilities. The Swarm and the Rock can both make the playoffs, but I don't think either of them can finish higher than third. The Black Wolves have not announced that they've clinched. They actually confirmed with I tweeted to them this morning, asking, or last night I guess it was, asking about that, and they said if Georgia loses today, then they've clinched. And Georgia didn't lose today, so according to them, they still haven't clinched a playoff spot. But I looked over as many different scenarios as I could come up with, and I can't find one that means the Black Wolves finish any lower than third, which means, as far as I can tell, they are in the playoffs.
So you missed one.
Either I missed one, or it's very possible that I've misunderstood the three-way tiebreaker. Because if it's possible that New England, Rochester, and Georgia all end up at 9-9, and I looked through the 2016 media guide to figure out the three-way tiebreaker, and it kind of looks like you take the combined record of each of those teams against the other two. So you would take New England's record against Rochester and Georgia combined, and same for the other three, and then you compare those three, and if there's a strong ordering or a strict ordering, then you're done. If not, then either one team is first and the other two are tied, in which case that team is going to be second in this case, or two teams are tied and the other one is behind them. And I think in that case, in the case that I was looking at, Georgia and New England would be tied and Rochester would be last of the three, which means that Rochester and Toronto would be out of the playoffs, the other three would be in. I may be misinterpreting that, so if that's wrong, then it's certainly possible that the Black Wolves could be eliminated. It's kind of academic because it seems unlikely that they're going to miss the playoffs anyway, but yeah, I guess we'll see what happens next weekend when the games from next weekend. So Buffalo's in, New England is probably in, and then either Rochester, Georgia, or Toronto will make up the other Eastern Division team. It's looking like Rochester at this point, but no guarantees. Again, in the West, Saskatchewan and Colorado were both in. The other spot is either, obviously, Calgary or Vancouver. And I think at this point, Calgary has announced that their magic number, as they call it, is now 1, which means that if Vancouver loses at all or Calgary wins at all, then Calgary clinches. So for Vancouver to make the playoffs, they have to win out and Calgary has to lose out. And I think that will do it because I think they might actually end up tied in that case. And then Vancouver would win a tiebreaker, and I can't remember the details, but it's in my blog post if you want to go look there. Yeah, so that's the playoff position that we have now. Dhane Smith broke a record. He's been breaking records all season long, and will probably break at least one more, if not two. But the one he did this past weekend was the highest point total for a Bandit in a season. Sorry, not the point total, goals total. It does seem odd, I think somebody tweeted this today, that the first season that John Tavares isn't around, somebody breaks his record as he's standing behind the bench. So Dhane Smith is now sitting at 58 goals. The NLL record is 71 for Nathan Iannucci almost 10 years ago, and it's not unlikely that Smith will get there in the next 4 games. He's also sitting at 116 points, a number that's only been beaten by one person ever, and that was Shawn Evans last year. So Smith is 14 points away from that record with 4 games left, and he's averaging 8.3, almost 8.3 points per game. So unless he really drops off a cliff, he'll have that record either next weekend or 2 weekends from now. I guess it would be 2 weekends from now because Buffalo only plays once next weekend. Or he could have a really good game and just do it then. And Sorry, go ahead, Tyler.
I was going to say, I'm hoping he's able to translate this success into a new contract next year so he can give his brother as much as Joey Capito gives his sister in the Western Union commercials.
That's true. Actually, I think Dane's brother's birthday was about 2 weeks ago, and he actually said something like that on Twitter. Don't worry, I gave him more than $200. Yeah. So where are we going now? So yeah, Smith it's not unlikely that he's going to set the new goal scoring record, and even less unlikely that he will set the new point scoring record. And I think he's still on pace for about 148 points or something insane like that. So he's been pretty exciting to watch so far this year.
He has been crazy to watch this year. I cannot believe where we're sitting with some of these records that, like last year we were amazed, and around the league everyone was amazed that some of these were being broken or even close to being broken, and now it's just like, yeah, it's old hat.
Yeah, he's hitting these records, and it's not like, well, he might get the record in the last game of the year. No, he's getting the record 3 or 4 games before the end of the year.
And so that kind of shuts down those people who would be like, well, Tavares did it in less games if he does do it that quick, since it would be about the same amount of games.
That's true. Smith broke the record for Bandits goals in 14 games, and it was Tavares' record that he broke, who also did it in 14 games. And Smith has now broken. I guess did he break it? I guess, yeah. John Grant's record from a few years ago was 115 points, and he did that in 14 games because we were in a 16-game season at the time, and he missed 2. So the fact that he did it in 14 games was pretty impressive. So now Smith has equaled that as well, also in 14 games. So now the other record is 130 points in 18 games, and he'll likely do that in 16. So you can put asterisks all you like next to these records because they're in a different number of games, but Smith seems to be hitting those records in the right number of games, so there should be no asterisks there at all. Okay, moving on to the games of the week. I only saw one of them, so I won't have much to say about most of them, but we can go over them anyway. The first one was New England over Saskatchewan, and this, I guess, was Friday night. This was a surprising one. Where did I put it here? This looked like kind of a typical Saskatchewan game, honestly. They took the lead in the first. They reeled off 6 goals in a row and were leading 7-1 early into the second quarter. And New England just gradually chipped away at it and eventually came back and scored the last 4 goals of the game, tying it at 10:43, so less than 5 minutes left. Kevin Crowley tied it up. And then Shawn Evans won it a little over a minute later, and that was the end of the scoring. So they managed to hold Saskatchewan off the board for the last 10-plus minutes and score 4 of their own to get back into it. So, I mean, any team that can beat Saskatchewan this year is doing okay, Vancouver notwithstanding. But any team that can come back from being down 7-1 to the Rush and beat them in regulation is somebody you got to take seriously. Yeah, so good job to New England for that. Shawn Evans with 9 points, Kevin Crowley with 7. Yeah, it's quite amazing, and I've seen some talk about Shawn Evans should be the MVP this year, because even given what Dhane Smith has done in Buffalo, Shawn Evans moving from one team to another and still pulling off 100. Well, he's at 105 points or something now, but he'll likely be up in the 130 range as well. And doing that with a brand new team that had a 4-14 record last year is pretty impressive, and you could certainly argue that the Black Wolves wouldn't be anywhere near as successful this season as they have been without Shawn Evans. So I guess it comes back to the same question that we ask every year: does most valuable player actually mean most valuable to their team, or does it just mean the best player? And that question comes up every year, and nobody ever is able to answer it. Any opinions on that one? Tyler, what do you think?
Yeah, the idea that I agree with that same idea that the most valuable player on a team or just the best player, but Buffalo's leading the East and the guy is leading that team. So Evans is huge impact in New England, but it's not the best team in the East even. So Dhane Smith is going to have this MVP thing. If it's not unanimous, that will be the main discussion point, I think. There's no way he's not a unanimous choice right now. As far as New England's change, I also think that their coaching change. They brought in Glenn Clark and Jim Veltman, and I think that's had a great impact on them as well. Because it's not just Evans. Like, they add in Evans, and they're down 7-1. Like, he's got to score some goals to get back, but they got to shut it down. And that's coaching that'll make those adjustments to shut down the Rush's offense. So all over the floor, they're improved this year, and they're really I think that's just surprising me. They always think they'd be middle of the pack, but right now they got second place pretty much locked up, and probably not out of reach of going all the way to first if they were probably do some magic wins and get some help. But they got good things going on there, and Evans is doing great, but he's not an MVP. Unfortunately, he's the team's MVP, but not the league MVP at this moment. What do you think, Melissa?
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I mean, a lot of times, in a way, it is one and the same, because if you're an outstanding player, then you're having a huge impact on your team. And what you're saying, like with Evans, yeah, he's definitely making an impact on that team, but you can't argue that Dhane Smith is making an impact on the Bandits because he's on a record-breaking pace. So this is after one of their best players retired, and so you can't argue that he is having an impact, because if they didn't have Dhane Smith right now, then Buffalo might not even be in contention. Obviously, it's hard to argue when, the what ifs, because you're changing everything when you change one. But you can still have a huge impact even if you are being an outstanding player too. So yeah, I agree. I don't think you can overlook Dhane Smith at this point, not just because of the record. Take the record out of it. He's just having, a career high season. He's in everyone's bullseye right now, and that's for a reason. And he's just making huge waves. You just can't stop him right now.
It's a bit of a different situation this year, where, as we're saying, sure, the Black Wolves wouldn't be where they are without Shawn Evans, but similarly, like you said, the Bandits wouldn't be where they are without Dhane Smith. Last year was a little odd because it looked as if the Roughnecks weren't going to make the playoffs, and yet Shawn Evans was still having this outstanding season. So how valuable can he be to his team if the team doesn't make the playoffs? They could quite easily not make the playoffs without Shawn Evans. So it was a bigger question as to whether he was having an MVP type season last year versus this year, where they're obviously almost guaranteed to make the playoffs at this point. As it turns out, Calgary did make the playoffs, and Evans did win MVP. So it's always an interesting question. Moving on, I guess we'll kind of stay the same in that we'll talk about New England, and they beat another team by scoring 14 goals. On Saturday night, they beat the Rock 14-10. This one was kind of back and forth in the first quarter. New England took an early lead, and then Toronto took the lead back, and then New England tied it, and Toronto took the lead again, and it kind of went back and forth a couple times. And then New England took the lead, and Toronto tried to chip away at it here and there, but gradually the lead just got bigger and bigger to the point where early in the fourth they were leading by 6. Toronto did keep trying. They chipped away some more. They scored 3 straight and kept New England off the board. But then the Black Wolves got 1 goal from Shawn Evans, and then another goal on the next face-off. So 2 goals in 6 seconds, and that pretty much did it for the Rock. They said, okay, well now not only do we have those 3 goals to make up because we were only down by 3, but now we have to make up those other 2 as well that we just gave up. And we've only got 5 minutes left to do it, or I think at this point it was about 3.5. So that pretty much did it for the Rock. Nick Rose didn't have a great game. He wasn't terrible, but he had more of those he'd like that one back kind of goals. Evan Kirk didn't start off looking very sharp at all, actually, because at some point somebody asked me, who's the Civ in net down there? After Toronto had scored a couple fairly quickly. But he really turned it around and only allowed 1 Toronto goal in the second quarter. They went over 13 minutes without scoring twice. Kirk really came on and played really well after that. And obviously Shawn Evans was everywhere. I thought Pat Saunders had a good game. One other thing that I wanted to say was one of the Buchanans, I'm pretty sure it was Kyle Buchanan, was ragging a ball down in the corner during a penalty kill, and I think he was triple teamed for most of it, and he just held onto the ball. And it wasn't even just he was in the corner holding onto the ball and getting pounded, which is something that somebody like Mark Steinhaus would do. He was running around and zipping around, and he was surprisingly fast, I thought, for one thing. But he held onto that ball for a long time and did a great job on the penalty kill, so kudos to him. Lot of power play goals in this game. New England had 5 of them, plus a shorthanded goal. Toronto had 3 of them. There seemed to be a lot of penalties. I guess 16 penalties in the game. Nothing ridiculous, but there were a few questionable ones where somebody would get chopped in the head, and he'd turn around and chop the first guy in the head, and the second guy would get the penalty. So I guess it just depends on where the ref's looking at the time, or maybe the first one was less of a hit to the head and more a hit to the shoulders or something. But there were some questionable calls. There was one penalty in one of the games this weekend that I wanted to mention because it was a really strange penalty, and now I can't remember what it was. It would have been in this one. Displacing the goal net. I don't think I've ever seen that actually called as a penalty, but Adam Jones was given that penalty today, so that was a little strange. That's about all I wanted to say for the Toronto game. We should also mention Shawn Evans set a record. He hit 100 points this season in that game, and he is the first player in history to have 100 points in 4 consecutive seasons. Garrett Billings became the first to do it in 3 consecutive seasons a couple of years ago, but then obviously the year he was injured for part of the year, and then on the holdout list for the rest, he didn't do it then. But so kudos to Shawn Evans for that. Tyler, you said you saw this game. What did you think?
Yeah, I was able to watch the start of it there before switching to the stealth game, and I don't know which Rock uniforms those were, but they looked really good. I definitely like the actual sweater strings on there. The Nighthawks paint them on, and that kind of looks all right, but you could see them flopping around. And it's a nice alternate jersey for you all there. 'Cause it wasn't a regular jersey, was it?
It was actually one of the regular jerseys from about 8 or 10 years ago. I have 2 Rock jerseys. This is my lighter one because it gets pretty warm in here when we're doing the show, so I put the lighter one on. But the other one that I usually wear to Rock games is much heavier, and it actually looks exactly like that one.
Yeah.
Which I've had for 10 or 12 years, so it's quite old now.
Yeah, but New England's looking good out there. They got 2 straight wins this weekend. Some good momentum. Shawn Evans, 4 straight seasons, 100 points. And you mentioned earlier, but like he switched teams in the middle of the streak. And that is amazing. Like you trade away a guy who's puts up record-setting points. It's like as much as we want it to be an even playing field, the players have a lot of power to say, I'm going east. And sure, you're the MVP, we'll trade you. And we'll get some deal where they end up with Tyler Digby and like a pick, which is not a fair trade. But the guy wasn't going to show up in Calgary, and somebody had to make something work. It's impressive, and we already covered the idea that he's a great rallying point for the team and new coaching staff, and they got great stuff going in New England, and they're on pace to get a home playoff game probably, and maybe go a couple rounds. They don't have a lot of playoff experience other than, well, Evans and Jordan Hall, but all those other guys who have been there for a while, they haven't had a lot of NLL playoff experience, and we'll see if that comes back to bite them later on, but they're on a good path right now, even though they're technically not in. Let's go. Melissa, any thoughts here? You're muted.
It does help to unmute. No, I don't have anything to add. You guys covered this one pretty well.
All right, we will move on to the Buffalo-Rochester game, and this one was happening at the same time as the Rock game, so other than watching the score being announced on Twitter every now and again, I didn't see any of any of this one. We mentioned Dhane Smith setting the team record. 5 goals in this game for Smith, no assists, which is a little odd, but he now has 58 goals and 58 assists on the season. So that's pretty impressive. He's not one of these, like if you look at Ethan Iannucci the year he scored 71, he ended up with 100 points even. So he had 29 assists on the season and 71 goals. Now at the same time, if you're scoring at that kind of pace, then people are going to be feeding you the ball and you really should be shooting. So it's not as if he was just a ball hog and refused to pass it, I'm guessing. He was just seeing the ball really well and seeing the net very well, and so he was probably shooting more than anybody. But to have that many goals, as many as Smith, and the same number of assists is pretty impressive. And yeah, so I mean, how much more can we go on about Dhane Smith and what an awesome season he's having? But what else do I see that's interesting in this game? Dan Dawson 7 points, Cody Jamieson had 5. Ryan Benesch only had 3. Looks like lots of transition from Buffalo. Brownell, Priolo, Brock, Thornbert all had goals. Priolo actually had 2. Yeah, so I didn't see this one, so that's really all I have to say. Melissa, I know you didn't see this one either. Tyler, what about you?
Halftime of your game, I flipped over because they were offset by like half an hour, so I got to watch a little bit there. But yeah, nothing that really stuck out to me in the time I was watching it. And thinking Ryan Benesch only had 3 points, and him and Vince starring in those commercials nonstop. I guess he doesn't want to score on his friend Matt Vince. I don't know.
That could be it. Okay. Next game is Vancouver and Calgary, and I also didn't see this one. I got home from the Rock game just in time, and I think I actually did see like the last 5 minutes of it or something, but not really much. So I don't really have anything to say about this one. Tyler, you saw this one presumably.
Yeah, you saw just enough to say, hey, there's still a chance. You tweeted something like that.
That's right, I did.
There wasn't. I think you said, I don't know. Anyways, Curtis Dixon broke his single season goal scoring record of the Roughnecks. He was sharing with Dane Dobie there, and there was 51, and now they're over that. The Roughnecks transition players had like a handful of goals. They just all were able to run down and get shots off. Both goalies got pulled throughout the game. Poulin was letting in a lot of deep shots, which was pretty uncharacteristic. One with McCready had his foot on the line, another with the shot clock expiring. Schuss on the wrong side of the field shot it from the bench outside the white line and snuck it in. And everybody's like, what? Actually, I think challenged it from the Roughneck side because they're like, oh, shot clock expired. You see the streak coming in. You could just see the shot clock as well. It was like frame by frame. And in the last frame, the shot clock said 1. The ball is a streak on the goal line. And the first frame when the shot clock says 0, the ball is a streak on the goal line and in the net. So they called it good. It was super close. It was a good call there. But I don't know. Stealth got out hustled. They, like I said, all those transition goals. Nothing was really going too right for them. They could never get any momentum, never get a string of goals together, even though they came out with a 3-2, 4-3 lead in the first quarter. So they came out good for 15 minutes. The other 45 was just bad. One thing that caught my ear, they had a different color commentator than usual working. Usually I have, a Grant and Ryan working in Calgary, the pair. And one of them wasn't there. I think it was the color guys. I don't know which one's which, unfortunately. But they had some other person there, and he's a player, somebody who knows what's going on. He kind of alluded to, like, uncertainty in what the Stealth are doing next season could be making all players, like, have this screw it attitude, and the reason they didn't show, like, the hustle and the commitment all over the floor. But then he didn't say anything else about it, and I don't know if that's exactly what he meant, and I don't know if I heard it wrong, and there's no replay to watch because it's on Fox Sports, but that was interesting. And the reason it's really interesting is this weekend for the in-between, or the commercial breaks, the Stealth commercial switched from, hey, come to a game, to give us your 2017 season ticket deposit. Meanwhile, some guys on the mic saying, we don't know, like, there's rumblings or something like that. And the color guy, the play-by-play guy, did not dig into his comment. He just ignored it and kept moving forward. But if those thoughts are out there, they're out there. The other thought for the Stealth is that I think they're called the Vancouver Giants, but they're a minor league hockey team in one of the 2 big arenas in BC. Might be looking to move to Langley, at which point the Stealth would not be a number 1 tenant, I guess, because they'd be a pro sport compared to a minor league hockey, but 9 home games versus 30 or 40, probably 30, I don't know how many minor league games they played in a regular season, they would no longer be a dominant tenant, and who knows. It's been a rough season, and the only conspiracy theory I'll back on this is they did 3 seasons in Everett, and this is the 3rd season in Langley, and you got to make a business choice probably after 3 seasons on what you're going to do at times. And fans aren't there. Team's not giving reason for fans to pile in. It's a tough situation, but they're playing it like they're taking renewals, and I think there's nowhere else for them to go that would give them as good a deal as they have now. So hopefully they'll keep chugging along, but losing record and poor attendance, you start having all these dire thoughts, and it sucks. Any thoughts from you, Melissa?
That really saddens me to hear that. It really does. But with a team that we've seen move so many times, it's kind of hard not to think that too. But especially since there was such a strong push to put a team back in Vancouver, and we know that the WLA is strong. So I know that some argued that that was part of why people won't pay for an NLL priced team, but during the fall and winter, spring. But that makes me sad. That breaks my heart. Other than that, I don't have anything to add on the game, but now that I have that in my head, I can't think of anything else.
It is kind of sad. And it's kind of odd because considering how the team has had basically the lowest attendance in the league for 3 years, and probably 6 years if you include Washington. I haven't actually heard any serious talk of leaving Vancouver or folding or anything like that. I mean, it's kind of thrown around as if, well, we always know that possibility is there, but that possibility is there for every team in this league. Maybe not Colorado, maybe not Calgary, but even Toronto, there have been rumors of moving to a smaller arena, which I would think would be a terrible idea personally. But I can't imagine the ACC is a cheap place to rent for 9 or more games a year. And I do remember there was an article in the Toronto newspaper a couple of weeks ago about Jamie Dawick and how he's losing, I think they said $100,000 every game that the Rock play. But he's also, he knew what he was getting into when he bought the team, and so that he sort of, it's cost of doing business, and he loves the team and the league enough that he's going to continue doing that. And I hope he's got an awfully deep bank book, because if that continues, it's going to just be losing money continually.
Well, and that goes back to what we were just talking about last week with the fact that really strong teams are struggling for attendance. So it really isn't a surprise that some of these smaller teams that have been struggling for a while are struggling even more. I mean, I don't believe that the Mammoth are pulling in 14,000 a game from the game I was at, and it's been on a downward slide for the past 6 years.
So yeah, back to Vancouver. Other than sort of the standard rumors that you hear all the time, I haven't heard anything specific about the Stealth. So I hope that whoever the color guy was taking over for Ryan Ballantyne, I hope he was just making that up, or there was some speculation and he doesn't have any further inside information that we don't have. Because as you said, Melissa, it would be rather heartbreaking for one of the strongest lacrosse markets in Canada anyway, to lose their team. But it just doesn't look like they're supporting the team. And I mean, we totally get it. If your team is not performing, it's hard to be shelling out money to go and see them every week. But at the same time, I would have thought that the Vancouver area was a big enough market that there would be enough lacrosse, maybe not addicted, but enough people that would be interested enough that they'd be able to support the team. They may not be bringing in 15,000 a game, which is good because their arena only holds 5. But if you've got an arena that only holds 5,000, you're guaranteed to have the lowest attendance in the league if you fill the arena every week. And if you're only half filling the arena every week, that's not a good sign. But I think the Stealth are getting a really good arena deal, so they're probably not losing tons of money. So it could be that, hey, if we bring in 3,000 people a game, that's enough, and it doesn't look great on the score sheet, but we're not losing money hand over fist, so that's good enough. And if that's the case, then maybe the Stealth will be there for 10 years, and they may not get any increase in attendance, but as long as they're there, we're happy.
Also, the Roughnecks Star Wars jerseys were super awesome.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Oh, I'm going to have to search out a picture of these. I did not see these this year.
They're up for auction.
Oh, they actually put them online? Oh my gosh.
You have another 2 weeks to bid. Maybe even 3.
See, that is awesome.
Yeah, Colorado had the Star Wars game a couple of years ago, and they beat the Stealth. And now Calgary's doing it, and they beat the Stealth. So maybe Star Wars Day is the thing to do.
Yeah, not Blackout. Blackout, Mammoth lose 100%.
Yeah, that's a different thing altogether, I guess. Some of the people in the stands in Calgary looked pretty good. There were a lot of pretty good uniforms, or not uniform, costumes. There were Wookiees in there, and there were Ewoks, and there were lots of Stormtroopers, and lots of Princess Leias, including one guy with a full beard and the Danishes on his head. So that was pretty awesome. So, I was going to say, speaking of high attendance, let's go to Georgia, where we had 3,500 people at the Swarm game against the Mammoth. And it's kind of too bad because they missed what looked like it might have been a good game where Georgia held the Mammoth to only 10 goals and scored 17 themselves, and may or may not have saved their playoff season, but if they didn't save it, they at least put it off an extra week. So this game I didn't see either. Tyler, you did, though. What do you think?
Yeah, got up and had a little Sunday morning because of time zones lacrosse. Started watching the game at 11. It's always fun to see the Mammoth lose, but just watching Georgia's offense, those kids, I mean, they're all first, second year players almost, except for Shane Jackson, and he's just tiny, so you always think he's young, and they're just pass, shot, and they just were getting shots on the crease consistently. It was incredible. They are the antithesis of the stealth offense, where stealth only have Joel McCready battle by himself to get on the crease. The Mammoth just moved the ball. The Swarm just moved the ball and exposed holes in the Mammoth defense and just kept getting easy shots. And I think the tweet I had was trying to be along the lines of, you watch the Swarm offense play, it's like watching HD, and the stealth offense is watching an old black and white TV. It's a huge contrast between the product that's happening and the results as well. So really fun to watch Georgia play. You just see behind the back passes, wild passes, one-handed, flip it out, another guy catches it. They had these redirects that they weren't trying to do it, but they'd like bounce off a guy's stick on the crease into some other guy's stick who just rips a shot and buries it. And a lot of lucky breaks in that sense, maybe, but they make their luck when they hustle and move the ball like that. And the Stealth have the players to do that, but they all just stand around and don't make this action happen. So there's some stuff you could learn there. Anybody who wants to beat the Mammoth the rest of the year should watch that game tape and run that offense, because it was shredding the Mammoth defense. Mammoth were missing a couple people on offense there. Grant, I believe, I've read he's on the injured reserve for, that could be for just a couple weeks, but he's not playing right now. And whichever Noble they have, I want to say Jeremy.
Yep.
Yeah, he's serving suspension, so they're missing a couple of big guns on offense. Callum Crawford had to carry the load. He did the best he could. But they weren't missing people on defense, and they got smoked by that Swarm offense.
Yeah, but I would say 17 goals, that's not the offense problem. That's definitely a defense problem. Yeah. Granted, 10 goals, I mean, for Colorado is pretty much on the low side, but 17 goals, yeah, that wouldn't have changed with John Grant Jr. or Noble in there.
Exactly. So in the rush, they know they're going to play him. Roughnecks looks like they'll, we don't know who's going to be the one or two, but I'd say the rush, watch that thing, and the games that were close with the Mammoth, I think they have a home and home coming up. They see if they can implement that in a week's time with it, one practice, right? The mighty NLL preparation rules. And I don't know, it's a fun game to watch. Good action, nobody at that game at all. More than the Stealth have at their games because it's a bigger arena, but the crowd shots were like tight shots of 2 or 3 people because there was nobody else around. There were no wide shots anywhere. They got that message from the up above. It's like, no arena shots, please, because people talk smack about the team, and you could tell. It was a little bit of a bummer. Sunday, 2 o'clock Eastern time, that's an awful start time. I don't think there's anybody else really in that arena. I think I've talked about this before. It's like, I don't know how they got such bad dates, but when they have a good product on it, people are having fun. What are your thoughts about your team here, Melissa?
You know, I wouldn't be surprised if Colorado went in a little cocky, thinking they were just kind of going to steamroll Georgia, and Georgia went, no, I don't think so. And they just kind of, because Colorado's defense has not been as strong as it has in the past. It's definitely been struggling the past few years. And so I think sometimes the offense is able to carry them because they are able to notch up those goals, and just kind of the defense can do just enough to keep the other team down. But I would almost bet they just went in there a little cocky, thinking that, hey, we're one of the top 2 teams. Who are these guys? Because I've definitely seen them do that a few times. So hopefully it'll be a wake-up call. You can't get cocky. I mean, it's anybody's game on anybody's day, and there's there's way too much talent in this league for you to take a night off and think you're still going to win.
And one other injury thing to mention. According to the transactions, Colorado and Mammoth have placed John Grant. They've placed John Grant on the active roster from the injured reserve list. Now they did that on the 6th. Okay, so they did that before the game, but he didn't play anyway. Okay, the other one I was going to say was they put Dylan Ward on the injured reserve list. So indeed, Alex Bouquet started this game, and then he was pulled for a little while, and Zach Boychuk went in. So no Dylan Ward is not helping the Mammoth defense either. Now Bouquet's had done a pretty decent job over the last little while. Obviously, didn't have it in this game quite as much, but
I think Bouquet is better in spurts than he is as the top goalie. I don't think, maybe he's just not to that level yet, or he's just a little more inconsistent when he is playing longer. I think having Ward as the top and him more as the backup really works well, because when he does have to come in, he plays solid. But when he has to play all 4 quarters, it's a little more inconsistent. So that's a little concerning since Ward was out injured previously.
Now, I don't know how long, I think it says injured reserve list first level, and I don't know how long that is. I don't know if that means he's out for 10 days from the date he was put on it, or 14 days, or some other number. So that doesn't really tell us an awful lot, but so he may be back next week. We don't really know. Yeah, I guess that's it for that game. Let's go on to our predictions, and we all did the same thing. We were all 3-2 last week. Overall, I'm
the same way though.
Sorry, Tyler. Say it.
We didn't get there the same way. I managed to flip one off from both of you.
That's true. We all got New England beating Toronto, and we all got Buffalo beating Rochester. You got the other New England win, whereas Melissa and I picked the Rush. And you also picked Vancouver over Calgary, and Melissa and I got that one right. So, yeah, we each got 3 right, but not quite the same 3. So I'm now 30-34, approaching the magical 500 level. Tyler is just over 500 at 33-31, and Melissa is still leading the pack at 38-26. And we have 7 games this coming week, so this will be there's a lot of games going on this weekend. I haven't looked to see exactly when they are, whether they're scattered or over the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or if they're all on Saturday night, or what they are. But Melissa, as we frequently do, since you're leading the whole season, you can start off with your picks for next week.
Yeah, what a surprise. Me having to give mine first. I guess I need to start losing, right? So yeah, I was kind of surprised. We have quite a few barn-to-barns and just back-to-backs this weekend. So with New England and Georgia, I think New England's the stronger team. So I'm going to go with them for that one. Buffalo and Toronto, again, I think Buffalo's just playing really strong, and I think the way Dhane Smith is playing, Toronto is going to have their hands full, especially the way they've been playing this season. For the barn-to-barn with the Rush and Colorado, I'm actually going with the Rush for both of them. Colorado has not been playing well on Friday nights, and I just don't know if they'll have the energy coming back to the Mile High City after playing, or no, they're playing up in Saskatchewan. So I just don't see them doing it. We'll just leave it at that. Toronto and Buffalo, I'm going to go with Buffalo again, so I'm going with both of them on the barn-to-barns, the same team to win. Georgia at Rochester, I'm going to go with Georgia. that one was a little tougher, but I think Georgia coming in kind of on a high after beating Colorado, and the Nighthawks playing as inconsistent as they are. I think it's kind of a coin flip on it, but we'll go with Georgia. And Calgary and Vancouver, I just gotta go with Calgary again. I think Vancouver could definitely be a spoiler, but if they're only gonna win one time out of 10, I'm gonna pick against them 9 times. So I guess Tyler, you're next.
Alrighty. So, New England at Georgia to kick things off. I've got the rush there. I mean, I love seeing Georgia play these games. They get some good runs, but then I look at the record and they're only 5-9. So they're not that great. When they're great, they're good, but they're not consistently great. So they won one here, and they should lose their next 2 based on that logic. Buffalo at Toronto and Toronto at Buffalo. I'll lump those together, and I'm picking Buffalo for both of them. Terrible injury bug for Toronto. Buffalo, meanwhile, is healthy, trying to lock up a top spot. They have the best player in the league. Everything says they're winning those games. Rush at Colorado. Then Colorado at the Rush, and so I didn't pay attention to the transaction line and see that Grant was eligible to play even though he didn't play today. I just assumed he didn't play today, so he was still out and not known for next week. And I picked the Rush to win both games because they had no Grant to help lead that Mammoth offense. So I've picked the Rush twice on paper here, and I'm going to stick with it. Like I said, they can look at that game tape from this morning and take games that have been maybe close with them and try that stuff out and see if they can get 2 solid wins and put it in the mind of the Mammoth that, hey, playoffs are coming up. We beat you twice this weekend. See you soon. It's a good attitude to have. You want to have that killer instinct and see if they can apply that. And I think they can. Georgia at Rochester. Like I said, they're winning 1 out of 3, roughly. The Swarm are. Rochester's won one more game on the regular season, but they'll be at home. And I'm picking Rochester to win there. The logic, they even talked about it during your game, Graham, with the Black Wolves coming in, haven't played the night before. And you think, are they tired? It's like, no, they're in a groove. And so maybe Georgia will have a little bit of a groove going from having played the night before. But I think Rochester's fighting for a playoff spot, and they have more experience being in that situation, and they'll translate that into a win. Finally, Calgary at Vancouver. Calgary also playing for the playoff spot. I talked to the Stealth players a couple weeks ago when I was up there after the Toronto game, and I could see that they wanted to beat Calgary at that time, but when they got on the floor, they were completely mismatched or whatever it was. And Calgary did beat them last weekend. They know they can do it again and get their playoff spot out of it. And so I think I'll pick Calgary there to beat the Stealth and lock up the their playoff spot, but not the overall playoff spots in the West. We'll still have a little battle for 1 and 2 being played out by the other 2 teams. But with a lot on the line and a good payout for a win, I'm going to pick the Roughnecks to do that. Who do you got, Graham?
I have the same as Tyler, so we're done. I guess I can expand a little bit on that. New England, Georgia. I guess I just saw New England beat Toronto on Saturday night, and they were pretty impressive. Georgia, as you said, are a fun team to watch, and I think they've got their offense working pretty well. Their defense needs some help, but I think New England is just a stronger team, and so I see New England on that one. Buffalo, Toronto, and then Toronto in Buffalo. I'm actually going to both of these games, so I'm looking forward to that. And I can actually see Toronto winning one of these 2, but I don't know which one. And I think in the grand scheme of things, Toronto has actually been more successful against Buffalo in Buffalo than they have been in Toronto. So I can see them splitting this series, but I hate to pick the wrong game and get 0 out of 2. So I'm going to game the system and say Buffalo on both, and I will probably be right on at least one of them. So that's my guess there. Though I suppose if I wanted to really game the system, I'd be picking different things from what Tyler picks, because otherwise there's no way that I'm going to gain on him. Saskatchewan, Colorado, I guess I'm kind of doing the same thing. They're both obviously top teams in the West, so either one could beat either one. This isn't Saskatchewan playing anybody. You always pick Saskatchewan, like we have in the past couple of years. But I'm going to go with Saskatchewan. They don't lose often, and they don't lose when they're winning late in a game often. I think I looked it up for NLL Fact of the Day to see the last time that the Rush were winning in the fourth quarter and lost the game, and it was only a year ago. But it was a couple of years ago. But in this. I'm thinking of two different things here. The last time the Saskatchewan lost a game, they were leading in the fourth quarter was a year ago. The other thing was the last time that Edmonton lost by 5, and that was about 4 years ago. So that's a different thing. But anyway, I'm going to go with Saskatchewan for both of those games as well. Georgia-Rochester. This one was a little tougher. Rochester hasn't looked like the Rochester that we've been used to for a couple of years. And Georgia, like we said, has a phenomenal offense. I think their offense can match up with anybody's. I don't know how they're going to do against Matt Vince, which is always a big question. But I think Rochester might be looking at the standings and thinking, okay, we're not number one. We're not guaranteed a playoff spot here. And if things keep going the way they have been going, we may not make the playoffs at all. And they're not used to that, for one, after winning 3 championships in a row and making the playoffs for however many years in a row they've done that. The possibility of not making the playoffs is going to scare them too much, and they're going to do whatever they can to make sure they do that. And that would be beating Georgia. And Calgary-Vancouver. Calgary's just a stronger team, I think, at this point. Vancouver's at home, which is not as big an advantage for the Stealth as it is for some other teams. So I got to go with the Roughnecks on that one. And that will do it. So me and Tyler have the same picks. Melissa has all the same picks except the Rochester-Georgia game, so we basically all sink or swim next week. And that's about it for our predictions. So unless you guys have other topics you want to discuss, that will do it for today.
I think we're good. It'll be interesting to see on the Rochester-Georgia game, because to me, that's just a coin flip.
All right, I guess that will do it. So this has been another episode of Addicted to Lacrosse. For Tyler and Melissa, I'm Graham. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.